Welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers podcast. We release podcasts here, in part and in full, on the Joy of Sunflowers website. The Joy of Sunflowers podcast is about sisterhood through infertility and pregnancy loss. We cover a range of topics including fertility, pregnancy after loss, and so much more. I speak with a range of people, including wellness professionals, medical experts, and beautiful mamas. The aim of this podcast is to bring you information and experiences that will validate and equip you for whatever season you find yourself in right now. Hi, Mackenzie. Welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers. Thank you so much for joining me today. And please introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you.
So my name is Mackenzie Eckinger. You can call me Kenzie, mostly known as 1 in 100 in the fertility community. So kind of, mine and my husband, our journey started back as soon as we got married back in April of 2018. We had talked, all through our engagement about when we wanted to start trying to grow our family. And both of us were just in agreement that we were ready, right away. So we started trying immediately after we got married. And it took us a full year to actually get pregnant for the first time. I actually had an appointment scheduled with our OBGYN about a month before we found out that we were expecting for the first time, just to talk about kind of next steps since we had been having issues. Because at the time I was only 25. So obviously, you have to wait a full year, at least here in the States, before they'll refer you out for any further testing. So we found out we were pregnant right around the time of our first anniversary. And everything was going well, and went in for my normal OBGYN appointment to confirm the pregnancy. Everything looked good. And then right around 5.5, 6 weeks, I started spotting pretty heavily at home. Called up my doctor. They had me come in. They kind of reassured me that, that's normal. Everything looks okay. It was too early to do an ultrasound at that point. So they sent me home. And then not even 24 hours later, everything just kind of changed in an instant. And I ended up miscarrying that baby right around 6 weeks. And then after that, we took a little bit of a break for a couple months, and then ended up finding out on our family vacation that same year in July that we were expecting again. But unfortunately, right around 4.5, 5 weeks while we were on our beach vacation with my husband's family, I ended up miscarrying that baby while on vacation. And then unbeknownst to us, surprisingly, we weren't even really trying again. We got pregnant the following month. And again, same thing, right around 4.5, 5 weeks, we ended up losing that baby as well. So at this point, we were at 3 consecutive losses. And so our OBGYN, he made the executive decision to send us off to a fertility specialist. So we had our first meeting with our doctor in October. I think it was Halloween. This was 2019. And so we did lots and lots of testing with them for the first couple months, and got put on a couple different medications just to kind of see what would happen, and ended up getting pregnant again, I believe in December of that year. And again, same thing as all the other losses, ended up losing that baby right around 5 weeks as well. So, had a really long conversation with our doctor. We did a little bit more testing, but still, couldn't find anything. And, even going into working with them, they told us right off the bat, with unexplained infertility, which is our only diagnosis that we really had ever had, 50% of the time, they never find out the causes of anything, and you just kind of remain a medical mystery, essentially. So still up until that point, 4 losses in, we still don't know anything. They still can't find the root cause of anything. So at this point, we took another little break and then started trying again, and then ended up getting pregnant again. And I have to check the dates, all the dates after a while, they run together, unfortunately. So let me just pull up my little journal here, just so I get all of my dates right. So we ended up getting pregnant then in February of 2020. And again, these have all been natural pregnancies with the help of a couple medications, but we had not done IUI or IVF or anything at this point. But again, same thing with that pregnancy. We ended up losing that baby as well, right around 4.5, 5 weeks. So we then set up another appointment with our doctor. However, COVID then came into play, right before we were supposed to meet with them, which really threw us for a loop. So we ended up having to cancel that appointment and just took a little bit longer of a break than anticipated, just with everything that was going on that was kind of out of our control. And then ended up getting pregnant right in the middle of lockdown here in the States. And unfortunately, same thing. This was at the end of April, beginning of May. Ended up miscarrying that baby as well. Again, same thing, right around 4.5, 5 weeks. So at this point, our doctor, he had recommended that we do I think it was called a hysteroscopy. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but I am not a doctor. So if I did say that wrong, I apologize. So we scheduled that surgery for the end of July. It was really just to get a good look at my uterus, just to kind of see what was going on. During that surgery, they ended up finding some leftover pregnancy matter that my body had not passed during one of the past miscarriages, because at that point I had passed all of them on my own at home. We never had to have a DNC just because everything was so early on. So they got that taken care of, as well as there was a little defect on the top of my uterus on the left side that they were able to correct. So we thought after that, maybe that was it. There was just some implantation matter left over that we needed to get rid of that was causing these babies not to implant correctly. So, we were in really good spirits after that. Then I ended up getting COVID about 2 days after that surgery, which again threw us for a loop because I could not make it to even any of my follow-up appointments because I was stuck in quarantine for a full 2 weeks there, which really threw us for another loop. But ended up getting the go-ahead a couple weeks after that to start trying again if we wanted to. So we did, and we ended up getting pregnant again, naturally, in October of 2020. But again, same thing, ended up losing that baby as well, just like the others, right around 4.5, 5 weeks. So decided to take another little break. And at this point, our doctor had brought up looking into possible endometriosis, just because my mom has a history of endo. At the time, I had never really shown any signs or symptoms of it. So it wasn't really a rock we thought to look under. But there was a new biopsy called the receptiva biopsy that he had helped kind of pioneer. So I ended up going in for that biopsy 2 days before Christmas in 2020, and then found out right after the new year that I did test positive for what's called the BCL6 biomarker for endometriosis. So at this point, our doctor, he gave us two options for treatment. Either we could just jump right into doing what's called a laparoscopy, which is kind of endometriosis surgery to go in and kind of clean out any of the endometriosis that was potentially there and anything else that was not supposed to be there in my uterus. Or we could do a 3-month-long pseudomenopause, which is what we ended up doing. So for 3 months, I was on letrozole every single day, which I had taken before to kind of help induce my ovulation every month. However, this was something I was taking twice a day, every single day. And then every 3 to 4 weeks, I was getting Lupron shots in my butt, which if you've never had a Lupron shot, consider yourself lucky. It was like one of the most painful shots I'd ever had in my life. The needle was about this long, and not fun times. And went through pretty much full menopause for 3 months, hot flashes, mood swings, just probably one of like the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Completely just did not feel like myself because essentially my hormone production was shut down for 3 months. And this was really, he described it as, it was just a way to kind of tame everything. It's not going to get rid of what's there, but it's going to help prepare your body for implantation. Because at that point, we were trying to avoid surgery as much as we could. So those 3 months went by, and then we got the go ahead to start trying again, and tried and had a pretty difficult time getting pregnant again. So at that point, we discussed the possibility of doing an IUI. And we said, we want to try one more cycle before we get to that point. Not that we weren't up for doing it. We just had kind of a feeling that we wanted to just try one more time. Ended up getting pregnant right at the end of August at this point, it was 2021. Ended up miscarrying that baby, unfortunately, as well. But again, same thing, right around 4.5, 5 weeks. So we took another little break and then decided to move forward with doing an IUI, which we had done in February of 2022. And everything was looking good with that. Ended up getting pregnant from that IUI, had gone in for my HCG blood test like I always do, and my levels were rising, but they weren't doubling. So after about the third blood test, we realized that the pregnancy was going to be non-viable. So I stopped all of my medications and ended up miscarrying right around 5.5, 6 weeks with that baby. At that point, we took another break. As always, we do that a lot after losses typically, and started trying again right around April. And at that point, we had found out, we got a letter in the mail that our doctor had retired unexpectedly. So we ended up having to switch doctors. Thankfully, we were able to stay with our same clinic, and we switched to a new doctor, which is the doctor we are currently working with now. And when we had our first meeting with her, this was at the beginning of May, we had planned on doing another IUI. And after speaking with her, she had realized that, all of our testing and blood work was at this point over 3 years old, and she was not comfortable with us moving forward with doing an IUI or trying again at that point. She wanted to get a full new panel of blood work, and she had saw that there was several different tests that we had not undergone yet that could be possible explanations for why we've had so many losses. So we went in at the end of May to get all those done. Ended up finding out that I had tested positive for some pretty high levels of the anti-thyroid hormone, or TSH. So they immediately got me on thyroid medication. I got diagnosed with hypothyroidism at that point, which, again, it was one of those, I really don't have any signs or symptoms of it, which is, I think, why we never really went down that pathway to look into that. But our doctor is very proactive with everything. So we tested for that, got me on medication, ended up finding out unexpectedly then in June that we were pregnant again. Naturally, we had not done an IUI. And unfortunately, same thing, ended up losing that baby right around 4.5, 5 weeks. So at that point, we took a very long break and then had a new appointment with our doctor then at the end of August, beginning of September, to kind of go over absolutely everything and get a good plan running forward. And at that point, we had decided we wanted to do another IUI, just more for the fact that we wanted to give ourselves the best chances at conceiving. Obviously, we've done a great job conceiving naturally on our own at this point, but this was just more of a way just to kind of take some pressure off of us and put it into the hands of our doctors. And this way too, I could be monitored really closely with ultrasounds. They could check my blood levels and all of that stuff really closely during the process. So just for more peace of mind at that point. Unfortunately, that IUI did not end up working. When I went in for my monitoring appointment for that, we had found out that I was ovulating that exact same day. So we had gone in the next day for the IUI, but at that point it was too late. I had already had my LH surge and my egg was released. So unfortunately, we did not get pregnant then. So we started trying again immediately the next month, and we were going to do another IUI at that point. But at that point, we decided we weren't going to do the in-office tracking. We were just going to track everything at home with over-the-counter ovulation kits. And we waited and waited and waited, and my body was just not in the mood for things that month. And I ovulated super late. So we canceled our IUI, but unexpectedly ended up getting pregnant on our own that month, which was this most recent pregnancy that we had. And everything looked great. My HCG levels were the highest they'd ever been. They doubled. I mean, exactly like they should. We ended up going in for our first ultrasound right after Thanksgiving and saw our baby. Everything looked great. We ended up going in about a week later, saw them again, got to see their heartbeat, waited another 2 weeks. They grew significantly, saw the heartbeat again. It was getting stronger. And at that point, our clinic decided to graduate us and put us in the hands of our normal OBGYN. So we waited a couple weeks and we went in the first week of January for our very first OBGYN, our first prenatal appointment. Kind of went through our history with them because we had not been working with them. The only time I'd ever see them was for my annual visits. So had to catch them up to speed on a lot of things that had happened and we'd gone through and go through a bunch of stuff. And originally, we weren't even scheduled for an ultrasound that day. But with our history, our doctor said, I want to take a look just to make sure we're good moving forward. And we were on board with that. And I said, that's great. Because just, with pregnancy after any loss, you're going to be high anxiety ridden, which I was the entire time, just with everything that had happened. So I said, the more times we can see this baby, the better. I'm all for it. So we had gone in and we were in the room, the sonographer, me and my husband, and immediately we saw the baby and they looked so much bigger than the last time that we had saw them 2.5, 3 weeks ago. And we could see their little head and their arms and their legs. And it was not even 2 seconds after we saw that the sonographer told us that there was no heartbeat. And I mean, we both we shattered, we crumbled, didn't really know what to do, was just completely at a loss. And it was one of those, obviously we've been in this situation 10 times before, but this was the first time, this last pregnancy was the first time we'd ever been able to see any of our babies. We had never been able to make it to the ultrasound stage with any of our other pregnancies. We never got to see their heart beating, never got to experience any of that. So this one just felt so much more real just because we had watched this baby grow, and to see that stop it's absolutely gut wrenching. So at that point, we had to have a conversation with our OB about, what we wanted to do. They gave us a couple different options. And then ultimately we decided that we needed to have a D&C done, which we'd never had to do before, just because all the other pregnancies ended early enough to where my body could pass everything on its own at home. So they ended up getting us in for that surgery that same day. Our OBGYN appointment was at 9:30 and we were over at the hospital by noon. Ended up waiting for hours and hours and hours. Our surgery kept getting pushed back. So we were at that hospital, all day. They ended up sending out the baby for genetic testing, which we'd never been able to do before. We tried one other time before, but it came back inconclusive because there just wasn't enough tissue to test on, and ended up getting those results back this week and found out too that little baby was a girl, which we'd never been able to figure out or know the gender of any of the babies. So, it just felt so much more real. And right now, knowing that, thankfully, we found out it wasn't anything, we did or anything that was even remotely in our control. There was a duplication of 2 of the chromosomes, chromosome 13 and 15, and they pretty much reassured us that the chances of that happening again are about 1%. And it was just kind of a really bad course of bad luck that we had with this. So we got the go ahead to start trying again. And right now that's kind of where we're at. We're just trekking forward and hoping for the best. So that's pretty much it. It's a very long, very, very long story. It's, almost 5 years in the making here. So there's lots of details. I know I miss things here or there, but again, it's so hard everything just starts to blur together after so long. So it's very hard to keep track of everything.
I think as well, like it's, you feel like it's a puzzle because you're like, it's the first, 10 losses between 4 and 5 weeks. So that you're just like, well, it's every time and it's at this specific stage. So there must be something that they can sort of find out and do. And clearly you don't have a problem getting pregnant, because most of it was natural, just happened.
Mm-hmm. And that's been the kicker with it all, and probably the most frustrating thing. Because it sounds horrible, but it's like at times it's like, I wish my problem was that we just couldn't get pregnant. Not that that's any less than what we're dealing with. It's all hard. Any aspect of infertility, no matter which way you spin it, is insanely hard. But it's just one of those, just the unknown. The unknown just drives you crazy. And it's one of those things too, we've tried so many combinations of medications and doing this with our cycle. And, at this point, I will say, I feel like even though they've never really been able to find a root cause for everything, I've always deep down had a feeling that it had to do with my progesterone levels. My mom, she had gone through years and years and years of infertility. She had dealt with recurrent loss. She had 5 miscarriages herself. And she kind of same thing, had to go on progesterone injections. And then my sister, she's had 5 losses as well. She's not done any fertility treatments yet. She had just had 2 losses, and then she had our niece. And then since our niece, she's had 3 more losses. But she had to go on those as well. And that was always one thing with our old doctor that I really struggled with. They had us on progesterone, the suppositories from the start. And I always told him, I don't think these are getting absorbed correctly. And, like, I know there's supposed to be some leakage and, discharge with this, but I mean, this is a lot. And it's coming out really fast. And, he always reassured me, this is normal. This is normal. Like, there's nothing to worry about. And I said, deep down, I just feel like this is what my problem is, because this is what was my mom's problem and my sister's problem. And, I think we need to switch things up. And he just kind of was very dismissive. So, once he retired and we started working with our new doctor, I mean, it was truly, looking back, just a complete blessing in disguise, just to get a new set of eyes in there. And immediately, she is so great with listening to my concerns. And that was one of the things that she had actually brought up. What are your concerns with things like, how are you feeling about the medications you're on? And I brought this up with her, and immediately, she was like, let's switch this up. Let's get you on those injections. This is the best thing you can be using for this. And, that was the one nice thing with learning from our genetic testing we had done, knowing that, this happened because of something that was out of our control. It didn't have to do with medications. It didn't have to do with lifestyle changes. It didn't have to do with anything we had done on our part. It was just kind of an act of God that had happened, and it was nobody's fault. And so knowing that, it's like, all the changes we've made in the last 2 months on these medications that our new doctor, this regimen she's had me on, clearly it was doing its job. So maybe that's been the problem the whole time. Again, they've not been able to prove that with testing or anything, just because of everything happening so early on. But I mean, at least it kind of gives us a little bit more direction at this point, which has been, I mean, huge. Because I mean, up until then, it's like we've been in the dark essentially with everything, which is just so frustrating.
With the process of the first sort of 10 losses, you said like you felt in the dark that whole time. You were like in the dark with like what was going on and what was happening. So how was that process for you, like mindset wise? How did you sort of move through it and keep going?
Honestly, I get that question all the time, and it's kind of funny. Like, truly, like, some days, like, I don't know. I think it's more of just a will. And I think a lot of us, like, once you find yourself in this situation, it's just kind of something you've had inside of you the whole time, that it doesn't come out till you need it to come out. And I think it's just because my whole life, the only thing, and I mean, it sounds so cliche, but you can ask literally anybody that's known me since I was little, the only thing I've ever wanted to be was a mom. And I've always just known that I was made for this. And it's been my one dream that I've had literally my entire life. And I think, honestly, just knowing that, and knowing that I'm the one that's in control of this, and I get to call the shots on how this goes. I mean, although, almost all of this has been out of my control, I still get to decide, whether or not I want to move forward. And I think for me, it's just, I think I've said this before on my page, it's more scary to me to completely give up than it is to keep trying.
I really hope you enjoyed the first part of this podcast. If you'd like to listen to the rest, please visit thejoyofsunflowers.com. Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.